convicted and jailed for raping vulnerable white young girls. It's not alleged, it's a fact.
And you know what? I always say the same thing in these arguments. I bet if any of their young girls had been raped by anybody, they'd have a different view. What else? Very quickly,
It's a disgrace. Well, I've got Rod Little and Tim Montgomery coming on for the first hour, so I can't say fairer than that.
No, you can't. He is the main man. Kev O'Sullivan here from 7 o'clock till 10. Petri Hoskins from 10 o'clock. I am back to a busy day tomorrow. Plank, Clash, and back with Drive Time tomorrow afternoon. Get your calls coming to Kev 0344 499 1000. You've got the Fox's biscuits. I'm going to get the train, which won't turn up. I'm going home now. Why am I going home?
Because you live there.
See you tomorrow from 4. Ta-ra!
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, it's me again. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk all the way to 10 o'clock. I am Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be with you for the next 3 hours. Stand by for a fast-paced torrent of news, views and dazzling debate, which you can get involved in by calling me on 0344 499 1000. It's good to talk on Talk. Or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I guarantee I'll play your message out. Busy day. Here's what's coming up. Of course, we should be seething that left-wing half-wits at the Home Office think we're all far-right extremists for believing in the obvious stark reality of two-tier policing. But more than that, this ludicrous, politically charged report proves that the dangerous ideologues at the heart of British government hate us. Like two-tier Keir, they look at those with whom they disagree, as in most decent Brits, and call them far-right thugs. That's you and me. 0344 499 1000, probably especially me, come to think of it. This ridiculous review, commissioned but thankfully rejected by Home Secretary Calamity Cooper, also pointed the finger at right-wing extremists who, and I quote, exploited the alleged group-based sexual abuse to promote anti-Muslim sentiment. Alleged? Alleged? Hundreds of Muslim men of Pakistani origin have been convicted and jailed for raping thousands of vulnerable white girls. Their vile crimes are not alleged, they are a sad fact. Who wrote this untrue garbage? And why did they conclude that rather than recording fewer pointless non-crime hate incidents, police should record a lot more? Why did they minimise the threat of Islamic terrorism and equate with the far less pressing problem of the far right? After all, between 80 and 90% of all terrorist attacks are by Islamic haters of the West. 95% of deaths caused by terrorism are caused by Islamic terrorist incidents. So why are these idiots at the Home Office droning on about the threat of the far right when the threat is really from Islamic extremists? 0344499 1000. In other news, boo-hoo, Trump's mass deportations made Selena Gomez cry. I've looked it up. I know who Selena Gomez is now. Very funny watching her sob. She deleted that pathetic video fairly soon afterwards, so she's not completely stupid. But why did the lefty government kick a few illegals out, and why don't our lefty government kick a few illegals out and make some lefty British actress cry? Meanwhile, Trump's clean woke sweep continues apace. The American military, diversity, DEI, gone. Trans troops, gone. Government officials who signalled their virtue and piously announced they would not participate in the purge of foreign criminals, fired. The Americans are loving Donald's dynamism, and so are millions of Brits who are just wild about the new president. Are you? 0344499 1000. Plus, the extraordinary case of the Gambian rapist who has successfully fought deportation 6 times and has now been awarded substantial compensation for the unjust ordeal he's been subjected to by a High Court judge who frankly needs his brains tested. He's a rapist who got 6 years behind bars. Why are we being nice to this guy? 0344499 1000. Also tonight, police have rearrested the female motorist who careered into a Wimbledon prep school and killed 2 8-year-olds. Why did they drop the case in the first place? The woman claimed she'd suffered an epileptic fit and has no memory of the horrific crash. Surely the cops confirmed this medically, or did they? What's going on here? 0344499 1000. And is this the Just Stop Oil moron I see before me? Climate dorks storm the stage and wreck a West End performance of Shakespeare's The Tempest, starring Hollywood actress Sigourney Weaver. Pop fact, her real name's Susan. Thought you might like to know that. Orange paint, the traditional halo polishing lecture, nothing whatsoever achieved. So why do these idiots keep doing this? 0344499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Tuesday night together. I've got a cracking first hour lined up for you. I hope this is going to be a regular thing. For the first half hour, the brilliant Rod Little, columnist in The Sun, The Sunday Times and The Spectator. And for the second half hour, Tim Montgomery, of course, Tory guru, has been a kind of backbone of the Tory party for more than 30 years, who recently sensationally defected to Reform UK. So 2 titans of the commentariat joining me for 60 sizzling minutes of world-class broadcasting. First up, Rod Little. Welcome, Rod.
Cheers, mate. Nice to see you.
Always a pleasure. These people in the Home Office who wrote this report, claiming that anyone who suspects there might be 2-tier policing in this country is obviously a far-right extremists, what kind of help do you think they need? Do you think they need to be incarcerated in some sort of asylum? What is wrong with these people? This is just ridiculous. As I said earlier, Rod, yes, of course we should be angry that these fools actually think that anyone who suspects we might have two-tier policing is some kind of far-right nutter. But we should also be very worried, because that's what these people think of us. People in the heart of government, including two-tier Keir, they hate us, don't they? They hate us.
They do hate us, and the whole purpose of that report by the people who wrote it was to exonerate Islam, was to dilute the notion of extremism as far down as it could go, so that Islam was kind of exonerated. Because it wasn't only far-right extremists they thought were a huge threat to the safety of our country. It was the threat posed by Sikh separatists. Now, I'm sure, like me, you've been appalled at the violence on our streets from Sikh separatists. I read a piece about Sikh separatism in The Spectator, and it said that there has been some hostility within Sikh communities, and that it's even gone so far that some Sikhs have had their turbans knocked off their heads.
I shouldn't laugh.
So that's the level of it. That is the level of it. Sikh separatism, misogyny, Hindu nationalism, and of course the far right, which they think is by far the biggest. These people are morons, and you read at the weekend that Rachel Reeves is looking desperately to save some money. Sack those people. So, well, you've done that. Sack the High Court judge, but sack those people first.
It's just really absurd. Do you remember Keir, two-tier Keir, when he was asked about this in the wake of the Southport riots, and said, "What about two-tier policing?" He said, "It's not an issue," and just stormed off. That has been his only comment so far on whether or not we have two-tier policing. I'm going to be talking to Mike Neville in a little while on this show, a former Met Police detective superintendent who served in the force for many years. Him and many other current coppers and past coppers will tell you that two-tier policing is a stark reality in our police forces today.
It's a reality.
Yeah.
It is a reality, though I did think you were going to say Mike Neville, the former presenter of Look North, who I didn't know he was still around, but anyway. Quite right. Of course it's around. Of course it's there. We know it's there. And Starmer, he becomes unaccountably tetchy. I don't think he's long for this world, but that's another issue, I suppose.
I think you're right. Old Wes Streeting's on manoeuvres, Bridget Phillipson's on manoeuvres, even Angela Rayner. So you kind of, you sort of think, well, let's get rid of Keir, that would be good. And then you think of the replacements. I suppose that of the three, I'd take Wes out of those three. The other two are terrifying.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I was going to say, in credit to the Labour Party, and Yvette Cooper, they've also refused to publish this fatuous document from the Home Office civil servants. So they clearly know it's as stupid as the Tories knew that it was. Mm-hmm. And you just think of how much that document cost in man hours and so on. And you think, sack the people. Yeah, they did a bad job.
We should know who wrote this nonsense. We really should. It would have been a team headed up by some idiot. And of course, they also talk about how right-wing extremists, that would probably be you and me, Rod, among others, exploited, and I'm going to quote this, they say exploited the alleged group-based sexual abuse to promote anti-Muslim sentiment. That would be the rape gangs. It's not alleged. Hundreds of men of Pakistani origin, Muslim men of Pakistani origin, have been convicted and sent to jail for the mass rape of thousands of vulnerable white young girls. It's not alleged, it's a fact. So these people aren't even dealing in the truth. They're basing their nonsense on falsity.
Yes, and what they're trying to do at the same time through this report is try to say, actually, there isn't a special case to be made for Islamic terrorism. There isn't a special case to be made for the rape of those poor girls by Muslim men. It's all part of a whole, and we shouldn't distinguish between it. They actually say we should take no account of ideology when we're trying to look at who's causing terrorism, and just look at what people do. But the ideology is one of the reasons it's done, and it was one of the reasons that those white Christian girls, nominally at least, were raped rather than Pakistani girls who were Muslim. They weren't raped.
This is why, well, let me ask you, why is it that this country, alone in the world, goes out of its way to try and avoid branding anyone a terrorist? When I say that, that is if they're a person of colour or a Muslim. Millwall fans, far-right thugs, they're immediately branded terrorists. The guy who killed Joe Cox was immediately branded by Kieran the gang a terrorist. The Welsh guy who drove up from Wales, having watched that TV drama Three Girls about the Rochdale gang rape scandal.
Yeah.
He drove up the M4, drove at the worshippers at the Finsbury Park Mosque, killed one guy, and he was immediately branded a terrorist. But if they're a person of colour, we go out of our way to say they're not a terrorist. I mean, what is all this nonsense about, oh, well, if they're not adhering to some strict ideology, then they're not a terrorist? I say Axel Rudikabana, right, I get the fact he was a loony, he was a loner, but he had an Al-Qaeda manual and enough rice in poison to kill thousands. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. Why are we going out of our way to say, oh, no, Axel Rudikabana, he wasn't a terrorist? It's pathetic.
Because it's very simple. It's because it gives a lie to the idea that this is a peaceable, multicultural society and that multiculturalism works. Multiculturalism doesn't work. We haven't integrated the people who've come here sufficiently, and we've let far too many in. And that's the truth. They know it, but they can't admit to it. They do everything they possibly can to disguise the fact that multiculturalism is pretty much a disaster.
It certainly is. Listen, Rod, we're getting a lot of crackling on this line, so we'll go to break now, sort the line out and come back in a couple of minutes. Everybody else, stay tuned.
And again, basically, you could have the radiotherapy, but you get a third option, which is called HIFU. But he did say, we don't do that here. We'll put you in touch with somebody. That's the route I went for because there's least side effects for it.
Okay.
There's only like 2 very small side effects. And I went to Southampton for that. And it's literally done in a day.
Wow.
Literally, I was called at 10 to 6 by the theatre assistant. Next thing I know, it's 7:15, and I was going home just before 10 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to columnist Rod Liddle. By the way, I always call him a columnist. Of course, you can read him in The Sun, The Sunday Times and The Spectator, all three brilliant columns. And you can tune in to him every Saturday morning on Times Radio from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. That has changed my routine at the weekend. I'm listening in to Rod now. Right, that's true, Rod. It's good stuff. Now,
Thanks, mate.
Like me, I know that you're probably a massive fan of Selena Gomez. Today, I've had to look up. I've had to look up who she is. She's very upset about Donald Trump's mass deportation of illegal migrants. So here she is expressing her absolute distraught emotions about this terrible saga. Watch this.
I just want to say that I'm so sorry. How many people are getting attacked? The children. I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
I've got an idea. She could take her $1.4 billion fortune and maybe give it to some of these poor guys who are being kicked out of the country right now. I wish our government would start deporting people like Donald is, so we could have some left-wing actress like Olivia Colman or someone like that start weeping down the airwaves at us. But we're not going to get that here. But your take on Donald's uncompromising approach to their migrant crisis over there?
He's doing what he said he would do. Well, I don't quite see why anyone's either surprised. I suppose we should be surprised when politicians actually do what they say they're going to do, but he is doing exactly what he promised he would do, that he would deport illegal migrants. And she is, that was a confected burst of lovey outrage. You know, if about something, you turn on your phone and record it for posterity. Who do you think you are, you jumped up? Words fail me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I can think of a few words.
The one good thing, but the one good thing is that for every lovey sobbing, Trump's poll ratings will go up by 1%. You know, if you can get Robert Downey Jr. to shed a few tears, it'll get even better. Those days are gone. The days when we listen to these idiots have gone in America. We still have them, of course, and you're quite right. If it happened here, you'd have Emma Thompson and Brian Cox jumping up and down, Michael Sheen, God almighty, and Cumberbend or whatever his name is, Bandersnatch. I can't remember his name.
Do you know what's strange?
So yes,
do you know what's strange is the way that Brian Cox is quite politically inclined, but because he's an actor. And, and he's quite successful and he's in popular TV series. We're all supposed to listen to him. We're all supposed to take him as a political sage. All of these people. You never get right-wing actors, do you? Never get right-wing singers going, I love him what Donald's doing. Why are they all lefties, this lot, these lovies?
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because they never used to be. Hollywood used to be split. between, people like Charlton Heston, John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart. James Stewart was very right-wing, the most right-wing of them all. People like that. And then on the left, there was Burt Lancaster, Edward Asner, and the Fonda family. And that was a good split. It made things interesting. There's scarcely a split anymore. The number of Hollywood actors who could said to be, even tending to the right. Well, there's John Voight, who we know about. There's James Woods. There's Vince Vaughn, and there's Joe Pesci. And that really is about it, Yeah, I know. Matthew McConaughey, maybe.
Yeah, well, here's to them.
No, it's.
Here's to them.
Yeah,
Listen,
but I think the thing is that the Hollywood establishment and our lovely establishment are authoritarian scumbags. And if you are thought of as being, on the wrong side of an argument, they will blackball you and you won't get a job. Yeah. And that's happened to a lot of people I know. They just don't get jobs.
Absolutely. I will never forget Emma Thompson suddenly appearing. Do you remember years ago the Extinction Rebellion demo in Piccadilly Circus in the central London, and they put a big pink boat there, and she appeared on the deck to make a rousing speech to the climate activists, and then it transpired that she just arrived by first-class flight to Heathrow Airport. And when asked by some sort of astonished reporter, did you really just fly over first class, on Virgin Atlantic? And she went, too right, I did. I mean, hypocrisy doesn't even begin to cover it, does it?
No, and yet, for all that, I really like her, and I really like Brian Cox as actors, and Michael Sheen. I think Michael Sheen's a terrific actor, but I've never heard so much imbecilic gibberish than what comes out of his mouth. He thinks only Welsh roles should be played only by Welsh people. But he had no objection to taking the role of a Teessider when he played Brian Clough.
Exactly.
He's an idiot. The man is an idiot. Yes. An absolute idiot.
What did you think
but
of...
a great actor.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps that's what you need to be a great actor, a total idiot. There's a lot of evidence that could be true. What did you think of the Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, responding to Selena Gomez? He said, cry me a river. If they don't like it, then go to Congress and change the law. We are going to do this operation without apology. We're going to make our community safer. It is all for the good of this nation, and we're going to keep going. No apologies. We're moving forward. I wish we had some politicians like that, don't you?
I wish we did. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think for the last two or 3 weeks, the British people have been looking rather enviously over the Atlantic of what's going on. And not just your Reform voters, not just the Conservative voters. I've heard quite a lot of people who sometimes vote Labour saying, "God, well, he's getting things done, isn't he? If only that could happen here." And I wasn't worried for ages, and I'm always asked this when I do question and answer stuff. How do we get rid of DEI? How on earth? And I say, well, it's going to take decades. No, it took him 1 minute. It took him 1 minute, and he got rid of it.
This is it, Rod.
It was absolutely wonderful.
This is it, Rod. I heard Lord Charlie Faulkner on Julia Hartley-Brewer's programme yesterday, and Julia said, quite logical question given what's going on across the Atlantic. She said, why can't we do this? Why can't we start deporting illegal migrants, at least the criminal element of them? A lot of these people that Trump is deporting right now, they're rapists, they're murderers. And people go, oh, you can't send them out of the country. Why not? So she says to Faulkner, why can't we do this? Why can't we turn the boats round? Why can't we tell these asylum seekers or these migrants as soon as they arrived, you broke our laws, you can't stay? say. I'd hear, oh, well, you see, Julia, that just wouldn't be practical. It's much more complex than just that. Well, Donald Trump, this is typical political rhetoric. Everything is complicated, everything is difficult. Donald Trump is ripping up their copybook and proving that actually politics can be very straightforward, and they are reeling, aren't they, the Falconers of this world?
Well, I hope that Julia, I didn't catch it, but I hope that Julia reminded Charlie Falcon that he is one of the main reasons that we can't get rid of asylum seekers, that he brought in the rules, and he's proud of it. This smug, odious Blairite, one of the worst members of the Blair cabal, odious little man, wants us governed by lawyers. And he's proud of that. He wants lawyers to run the country. He is a shocking indictment of what Blair stood for in the end, which was always, a juristocracy rather than a democracy. Yeah. And he was behind many of those laws which stop us doing what we should be able to do.
Yeah. And a paragon, of course, of political courage, never quite daring to put himself up for election, just chosen by the good, I mean, what are these people? But I mean, the truth is that I think Donald Trump is sending shockwaves through the world of Western politics, which is populated by people who like to promote the image of great complexity. Nothing can be done that easily. Well, Donald Trump is proving otherwise, isn't he?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think Trump will have a bit of a battle on his hands between his left and right wings. I think there is already quite a divide between those who go along with the libertarian side of Trumpism, such as Elon Musk, and those who go along with the protectionist leftish side of Trump, such as Steve Bannon. Yeah. And I think that you are going to see divisions there.
Yeah.
It's rather wonderful.
Yeah, I think what you have to remember, I mean, it's been a blizzard of announcements and certainly some fairly dramatic activity, but this is just the beginning. There's always a difference between what politicians say they're going to do and what they're able to do. But certainly Donald Trump seems to be achieving a lot more than most of them ever do. Rod, it's been a pleasure talking to you as always. Look forward to your columns and your show on Saturday morning. Rod Liddle there, columnist for The Sun, The Sunday Times and The Spectator, where I believe he's an associate editor, man of great achievements. And also, as I say, check out his show on Times Radio on Saturday morning. It's our sister station, so I can say that. 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. It's well worth a listen. Now, next up in the studio, it's going to be the great Tim Montgomery, and we're going to run through some more of the issues that have dominated the news agenda on this busy day. That next, stay tuned.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Tim Montgomery's in the studio. Welcome, Tim.
It's always good to be here.
Now, a couple of things. I want to talk about Donald Trump. I want to talk about the British people's response to Donald Trump. But what did you make? Well, first of all, can I get your take very quickly? Because we've sort of covered this with Rod and we'll get back to it a bit later. But this Home Office report, which thankfully commissioned by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, thankfully rejected by her. So I think we have to give her some credit there. At least
You're taking her at face value,
are you? Not really. I'm just doing my best to cut her some slack. But seriously, I mean, for people to be at the heart of government in a very important department like the Home Office, and to look to the British people who see two-tier policing, and they see it as a reality. We don't need to debate whether or not it exists. It obviously does. And then to say, well, they're just lying because they're far-right extremists. This is the majority of people in this country. I've been listening to talk all day. I've heard people, blokes phone out and say, I've served my country in Afghanistan and Ireland, all over and Iraq. And now the government is calling me a far-right extremist because I suspect there might be two-tier policing. It's worrying. I mean, it's infuriating, but it's worrying. They actually believe this, don't they?
No, well, it's an easier way of dealing with the problem. It's basically to try and shut up the debate by saying you're far right, rather than actually address the underlying point.
Yes.
And it's very worrying that the civil service, the Home Office, although are you surprised, Kev? I'm certainly not surprised that this is the view of people who are supposedly keeping us safe. And just returning to you giving Yvette Cooper the benefit of the doubt, which says...
Well, uncharacteristically.
I was going to say typical of your gentlemanly nature. But
I'm too nice, aren't I?
But there's another story today, which I think is related, and that's for Stephen Timms, a government minister who's responsible for outreach to faith communities, who attended the leadership dinner of the Muslim Council for Britain. Now, some listeners won't be aware about the Muslim Council for Britain, but supposedly this is an organisation that the government does not talk to.
Yeah, it's prohibited.
When I ran outreach to faith communities for the Conservative Party, I had a lot to do with the MCB. Whatever we discussed, there's a lot of common ground between us on the family and other things, but they kept bringing the subject back to Israel. Almost whatever I spoke to them about, Israel was what they really wanted to talk to about them. Now, I won't join the dots, but listeners can do that themselves. But there is something really sinister and unattractive about the MCB, in my experience. The government was right not to deal with them, but it seems when we're not looking, they are dealing with them. So Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, asked some very tough questions of the government today, and Dan Jarvis, the government minister, said, look, why are you carrying on with this? I've already told you we've disowned the report. Well, forgive us for a moment. When you are having backdoor negotiations with the MCB against government policy, forgive us if we're a little bit sceptical about your honesty.
Exactly. What's Sir Stephen Timms and 3 other Labour MPs doing at their leadership dinner? Yeah. We're going to be covering that story later on, so well spotted on that one, because we got it on our list, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, I think that the Labour Party have this kind of unnatural tendency to suck up to Muslims. There's nothing wrong with friendly relationships with the Muslim community, but our Labour politicians seem to go the extra mile. First of all, they want to exonerate them from any suggestion of terrorism ever, even though 95% of deaths in this country due to terrorism were by terrorist incidents perpetrated by Islamic extremists. So, our big threat of terrorism is Islam. The Labour Party doesn't want to get involved in that, wants to exonerate them, comes up with all these weird things. Well, we've got to define what terrorism is, what extremism is. I don't think we need definitions. The way I see it, I just said this to Rod Liddell, with Axel Rudikabana. Now, I accept he's obviously a lunatic and he's a loner, but to actually state, well, we've looked at our guidebooks and we've established that he's definitely not a terrorist. That's ridiculous. This guy was found with enough ricin poison to kill thousands and an Al-Qaeda training manual written by an Islamic extremists. And yet our authorities, our government, the police, Merseyside police, going out of their way. He wasn't a terrorist. This is an ostrich head in the sand policy that won't get us anywhere. The Labour Party are terrified of actually suggesting what the truth is, that our biggest terrorist threat comes from Islamic extremism.
And I think this links to our discussion on Trump, to be honest, Kevin, because there's an opinion poll out, which I think we're going to come to, which just shows an awful lot of sympathy from the British people to Trump-type policies. And basically what Trump has done is, you talk about an ostrich's head in the sand. I would talk about was it Hans Christian Andersen who told the story The Emperor Has No Clothes?
I think it was him, wasn't
Hans
it?
Christian Andersen. But for a long time, we have been told stuff that the average person in Britain, the average person in America knows not to be true. Like someone with an Al-Qaeda handbook, someone who's got a story up. They're not a terrorist. People think, well, okay, maybe the Emperor does have clothes on. But the thing is, the Emperor doesn't have any clothes on. He was obviously sympathetic to terrorist causes. And one day, and I hope it's soon, one day, this nonsense, like it's been happening in America, is going to be washed away.
Yeah.
And when it is washed away, and I think we're seeing this partly in America, the blowback isn't going to be significant, because what Trump is doing, and what a British government needs to do on this sort of stuff, is go with the grain of where people already are. This is not against the grain of human nature or British public opinion. People are fed up with Home Office and other officials telling us that black is white and white is black, this isn't terror, when we know what it is.
Exactly right.
And Trump is finally giving us the lead. And that's the importance of what's happening in America at the moment. Finally, he's not perfect. I don't agree with his pardons. I don't agree with him taking security clearance away from people. But overall, this man is doing what the majority of the British people and the American people want. And we're not getting it from our Home Office or our politicians, apart from a few honourable exceptions, at all.
As you imply, what we're saying is, the grooming gangs, that they were predominantly of Pakistani origin, Muslim men. Well, if you believe that, you're some sort of racist. Axel Rudy Obama, rice in poison, Al-Qaeda manual, obviously some kind of a terrorist. Oh, well, if you think that, you're Islamophobic, you're a racist, because he was a young man of colour. In other words, they're telling us that we are stating the truth, and they're saying, not only is that not true, by you believing that makes you a racist and Islamophobic. And you're right, we are sick to death of it, and we're not, to quote the film, we're not going to take it anymore.
And do you know who's most sick about it, in my experience, and who we are letting most down most, is Muslim parents in Britain today who worry about their children being radicalised. And they are seeing a craven British establishment indulge the extremism of their kids that they want de-radicalised. Most Muslim citizens of this country are good people who support British values. Unfortunately, Britain isn't standing with those Muslim parents. It's making excuses for the Muslim extremism of their kids and some of the other elements that we've imported into this country. And it's a disgrace. And as soon as as you say, we should have said for a long time, we've had enough.
You're right, Tim. Important to remember, the vast majority of Muslim people who live in this country, and they're very welcome and all that, are just like the rest of us. They're struggling to get by. They want to put a roof over their heads, feed their kids, hope their kids get a good education and a good job afterwards. But, they're the same as us, most of them. But there is, within that community, an extreme element, and they are a threat to us. Just before we go to break, Tim, I did want to run this by you. Trump again, as you say. A poll has revealed that the Brits are absolutely loving everything Donald's doing. But his latest executive orders, first of all, banned trans people from serving in the armed forces. And also, in terms of diversity, equality and inclusivity, he absolutely, completely eliminated that. Got rid of everyone who's got anything to do with DEI in the forces. And when a few of his appalled officials, government officials, said, in terms of the deportations, we don't want to be a part of this horrific purge of foreign criminals, about 10 seconds later, they were sacked. I mean, it's a sight to see, isn't it?
I honestly, I made it clear, I don't agree with everything Trump has done. But here's my question for you, Kevin. what he's doing on immigration, what he's doing on net zero, what he's doing on tax, could go on. Has there been a bigger movement towards conservative policy and values in our lifetime?
No, there hasn't.
We are seeing a massive revolution at the moment. This last week is the biggest shift towards conservatism I think we have seen. Bigger than anything Mrs. Thatcher did over 13 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
11 and a half years. This is an absolute revolution we're seeing before our eyes. Yeah. And some of it's not very good. Some of it's a bit the British people will be sniffy at. Yeah. But the overall bulk, thank God.
I'll tell you,
common sense is coming back to politics.
Well, one thing, it was good to see him signing all those executive orders, but he could have got the action going a lot quicker if his signature didn't take so long. It takes about an hour, doesn't it? It's like a graph going up and down.
And it does it with the what are those pens called?
Calligraphy.
But it's like you can hear it squeaking, can't you?
You can.
Across the page.
You can. And just before we go to break, though, I think that his dynamism is sending shockwaves through the political communities of the West generally. These people, our government, politicians in Europe, they're fond of saying, "Oh, well, you say you don't want any more diversity officers, but it's a little complicated. It's not very practical to do this immediately. It's far more complex than you think." And Donald Trump is basically saying, "No, it's not. We do it now." And I think politicians in this country and all over Europe, all over the world, are looking at him and thinking, "Oh my God, there goes our entire culture." And
isn't it interesting how big business, which has been a big problem in sort of a lot of the wokery that I think we've seen over recent years, that executive order you mentioned on diversity training, what he said is not just got rid of it out of government, he said any private sector company that contracts with government, they have to get rid of it as well, or they will lose the government contract. So he's not only changing government, he's changing the whole economy. And very few businesses are pushing back because they know it all went too far. It became too expensive. It was discriminating against some. For example, people from Asia were discriminated against because they were overachieving, but they weren't allowed to have, they weren't succeeding under the quotas. It was just a complete mess.
Of course.
And he's getting rid of it. It's amazing to see.
I'll leave this hanging in the wind. The NHS, our National Health Service, which always, of course, we've got enough money, we're so cash-strapped. They spend £40 million every year on 800 diversity officers. So think on that. We'll be back in a second. Stay where you are.
I watched that and it made me think, why are they making the celebrities cry? No. I can do another take. I don't think I really got that one. Can we do take first position?
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, it's not just it's performative. Of course, it's performative because it's being filmed. And even if accidentally you were thinking, do you know what? I'm just going to do a TikTok. And no, wait a minute, I'm crying. It was sent. It's not like it's automatically uploaded. So many decisions go along that pathway to be like, I want to say something about this, but I'll do it through the medium of tears and that noise that people make when they're crying.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with Tim Montgomery, former Tory guru for 30-odd years, who recently defected. I don't really like that word. Switched parties. Went to Reform UK because I think he felt it was more spiritually his home. And good for him for that. Me too.
But a bit like Talk.
Yeah.
I feel spiritually at home here.
This very much is our spiritual home.
Our church.
It's a forum for moronic debate. No, for intellectual debate.
Yeah,
So I got that wrong. First of all, I want to talk in a moment about a really egregious case of a guy who should have been deported a long time ago. But as a bedrock to that, foundation stone for that discussion, this could be quite good. A report now that the UK population could reach 72.5 million by mid-2032 because of net migration. That's legal migration. Many people believe there's probably 10 million more than that in the country right now. The official figures are around about 68.5, 69, going up to 72.5 million. And still they come. They're still letting hundreds of thousands of people in legally, not to mention illegally. Who's going to tell the government that this country is full?
Well, two things in response to this. I think what they used to do is they used to do things like they used to measure things like toilet flushes. Do you remember this?
Oh yes, yeah.
So they actually, the number of times that we have, without getting into too many details, but the average times the toilet flushes in a certain area gives an indication of actually how many people do live there.
Yeah.
And they've stopped collecting data like that because they want to disguise the fact that illegal immigration is out of control. So first of all, we don't know the true number, and they're not even making any efforts anymore, the authorities, to tell us because they're frightened to think about what they would find. Second thing is, there was a poll, you probably saw it in the Times yesterday, Kev, that said that young people are now increasingly open to a dictatorship.
Yeah, I saw they don't like democracy.
They don't like democracy anymore. And do you know why they might not like democracy?
Yeah, because of the Labour government.
They're not getting democracy. Because even if some listeners to this might not agree with controlling immigration, but again and again and again, all parties have promised to control immigration and they've all failed to do it. Now, if that happens on what has probably been the number one issue over the last 10 years, where politicians just go in a completely different direction than the public, it's not surprising people are giving up on democracy. So the issue for me about controlling immigration isn't just about the substance of the issue, which is huge. Our country is being changed in ways we've never consented to. But actually, I think it's imperiling democracy. When young people are willing to say they'd rather have a dictator than the freedom that we all, I think, should value at the ballot box, that should be ringing alarm bells in Westminster. And the failure of the British government, of the British Parliament, to deliver on promises that it's made isn't just bad politics, it's actually bad for our fundamental faith in how we operate as supposedly the mother of all parliaments.
Absolutely. This is the Office of National Statistics, which you can take as a very believable source. They say the UK will grow by 7.3% in terms of its population in the decade up to 2032. In other words, the legal migration that your party, Reform UK, say they will stop on day one. They have a very attractive policy called net zero on migration. So they'll stop it on day one. down, but it is going to continue. It's going to continue. And I do believe I'm right in saying this was one of the main reasons you quit the Tories, because they deceived the British public for 14 long years of lies when they said, oh, we're sorting out immigration, we're going to make our borders sovereign and seal them, meanwhile letting in more than 1 million migrants every year. And we don't know whether it is 1 million or it's 2 million, to be honest. We do not count people coming in and leaving the country. Nearly all of this stuff that we've been talking about from the national statistics of it is surveys. It's not actual proper border control. And the fact is, we're an island. We're one of the few countries in Europe that could actually monitor this properly, but we don't. And so you say the official estimate is that population is going to rise by 7.2%. I think it could be a lot more than that, actually. Exactly right, and I suspect... We always talk about the illegal migration problem as if every single illegal migrant who comes to our shores gets caught or ends up in a hotel and ends up in the system. Well, many of them don't. Many of them don't, and they don't all come across in small boats. So many people suspect that officially our population is about 68.5, 69 million now, but it could be 10 million more than that. This country is full, creaking at the seams. I want you to consider this, Tim. I want your thoughts. You've been waving your pen at me. This is serious. Listen to this. This is the case of a rapist from Gambia. He was sent to jail in 2015 for 6 years for tricking a drunk woman back to his flat in Watford and attacking her and raping her. His name is Ebu Jessa. He's 41 years old. Since then, he's fought a long campaign to stay in this country and has successfully warded off deportation attempts by the Home Office 6 times. 6 times. Now, get this. After his last asylum bid was rejected, he stated he would return to Gambia, but he didn't. He was arrested again for breaking the terms of his prison release, and he was put into a place called the Colnbrook Immigration Removal Centre. That's very near Heathrow Airport, specifically for people who are going to be deported. Now, he took this case to the High Court, where a judge ruled that that was very unfair. That was against his rights because there was no real prospect of deporting him, and therefore he shouldn't have been in a immigration removal centre, and therefore this judge awarded this rapist, who has got no right to be here, substantial compensation. It's just beggars belief, doesn't it? This country, when you hear stories like that, it's like a joke. Well, it's not a joke, of course, it's a sick... It's a sick very joke, expensive joke. But underlying this, I think, I've just been very hard about our politicians and the lack of democracy. But, we won't fix this country until we sort out the legal mess. Because even when a politician wants to do something, there seems to be a whole thicket of laws and judges who will frustrate what they're doing. And one of the big advantages Trump had, and he may not have planned this, but he got the Supreme Court reformed in his first term. So now there is a small C Conservative majority in the Supreme Court in the USA, which means the deportations that are taking place at the moment, probably if they're appealed to the ultimate court in America, they will stand. Yes. The problem is, if reform come in next time with the kind of agenda that you've just described, will the lawyers allow a democratically elected government to do what the British people have voted for them to do? And I leave that question hanging because I don't know the answer, but a truly reforming government won't just have to have a set of policies, they will have to change the whole way Britain is governed. Yeah, let's recap on that, though. I totally agree, Tim. A High Court judge has taken this guy, Ebu Jessa, did 6 years inside for rape. It was a horrible rape, by the way. And by the way, he was arrested once before for sexual assault. So he's not exactly the most attractive person you've ever come across. 6 years in jail, comes out, has successfully warded off attempts by the Home Office to deport him 6 times. And on the last time, because he was put into this deportation centre, a High Court judge, decides that we, the taxpayers, should give this guy we don't know the figures, but it's substantial. That means it'll be in 6 figures. It'll be more than £100,000, probably, knowing our lot, £500,000. What the hell is going through that judge's head? Well, it keeps him in business, doesn't it?
So there's obviously that offence of how much money he's getting, but I bet one thing that's much more expensive is how much has the British taxpayer spent on those 6 appeals? How much has this process cost us as well? And so those pensioners listening at the moment who aren't getting their winter fuel allowance, that's the kind of thing that the government is spending the money they're saving on that sort of thing. And no wonder people get angry.
Yeah, exactly right. I did a story last night, talked to Richard Tice from Reform UK about it. Family of 4 Indians arrived here and pretended that they were Afghani refugees escaping war and torture, and were therefore allowed to say. Then they were. It was discovered they'd been here about a year, 13 months. Then it was discovered they were lying. So they were told, well, you're going to get deported. But first of all, we're going to have to put you on trial for lying about where you're from. So they've been here ever since, and they continue to be here. Their accommodation costs to this government, or to us, so far have been £386,000, and their legal bills so far, legal aid, of course, £170,000. This country is barking mad, isn't it?
Imagine if we were transported back to the 1970s, Kev, and wrote this as a drama proposal. People wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't commission it. They'd say, this is unrealistic. What fiction are you writing here?
Yeah, they would put science fiction out of business, wouldn't it? Unbelievable. Tim, fantastic to have you here on a Tuesday. Hope you'll be back next Tuesday.
I definitely will be.
That is Tim Montgomery. As I say, he's going to be a regular, and I couldn't be more pleased. When we come back, we'll be talking to Mike Neville, senior copper, about two-tier policing. He believes it exists. Do you? That next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Two-tier policing. It's obvious. You can see it with your very eyes. It clearly goes on. There is a difference between the way police treat white communities and communities of colour, people of colour. There is a difference between the way they treat Millwall fans or those Southport white working class rioters than the way they treat members of the Muslim community. We know that. We know it. It's obvious. We can see it with our own eyes. But if you believe that, which I do, and I'm sure you do too, if you believe that, there are people who work for the government, who work in the Home Office, that confederacy of dunces, the Home Office, who believe you are a far-right extremist. To hold that view that perhaps the police treat communities of colour, people of colour, differently to the way they treat white Brits. If you hold that view, they think you're a far-right extremist. Are you? And what do you think of the fact that the government commissioned this report and it was written by people who are still working at the Home Office? They hate you. They hate me. And they're idiots. They're morons. But they're dangerous morons. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. We need to talk about this. We're now going to talk about two-tier policing for the next half an hour or so in the excellent company of former Met Police Chief Superintendent Mike Neville. Welcome, Mike.
Welcome. You promoted me, Kevin. I was a detective chief inspector, but I'll take the raise in my pension.
It's not written down here, so I just sort of I took a stab in the dark and overdid it. But you should have been a superintendent. You should be a superintendent.
No,
should be a superintendent now, for God's sake. Well, first of all, you're a copper of some standing. You were a long-term police officer, a very successful senior police officer who rose up the ranks. You worked at Scotland Yard, top of the pile. I've spoken to other people like you, former coppers. I've spoken to current coppers. I have not spoken to a single copper in this country who doesn't say to me there is two-tier policing. But apparently, if you believe in two-tier policing, Mike, and I believe in two-tier policing, we're right-wing extremists. Before we get to that ludicrous slur, there is two-tier policing, isn't there?
Absolutely, there is two-tier policing, and you gave several examples of that. And if we think of how the police manage an anti-vax march or an anti-lockdown march versus how they deal with Black Lives Matter or Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion, those sort of marches, it's completely different. And of course, we see the speed of justice. So with the people involved in the Southport disorder, they're swiftly dealt with. And yet, if you beat up armed officers at Manchester Airport, it takes several months for anything to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And so. Or if you're a Labour councillor who says that the people who have right-wing views should have their throats cut, that also takes several months. But the bizarre thing about this, Kevin, is that the left have forever been on about two-tier policing. So they're two-tier about two-tier policing because they would always bang on that, young black men are stopped more than white men. So they would go on about two-tier policing. What they would never do, of course, is justify that. They'll always say that the police have said, they're 5 times, 6, 7 times more likely to stop young black men, but they would never release the crime figures, which show that the officers are simply responding to the crime problem. The police cannot help the fact, say, for example, that 2% of London young black men commit 60% of knife murders against often young black men. So the left have been banging on about two-tier policing for many years. But as soon as anybody else points it out, then, as you say, it's far-right extremism, and they're condemning just ordinary people who just don't fit in with the liberal left point of view. And it's an echo chamber. You can imagine the people at the Home Office, they all sit there, they'll talk about diversity, but all of them believe exactly the same thing. And this is why you get these ridiculous reports like this.
Yes, and let's analyse some of the examples of two-tier policing. In the summer, those riots that followed the horrendous murders in Southport, obviously most of the rioters were white and working class. The police were down on them like a ton of bricks, arguably in most cases justifiably, but they were spread through the justice system with almost almost indecent haste. Arrested on a Tuesday, in jail by Friday. Other people waiting 2 years for their case to even come up at court. So there was definite special treatment there. Same across all of those cities and towns that suffered those riots. I remember one kid, 18-year-old kid, who stupidly unfolded a sort of St George's Cross flag outside a mosque. 18 years old, just started an apprentice, got 3 years. Not to mention the keyboard warriors, housewives sitting there writing silly things on Facebook, getting sent to jail. Absolutely over the top, disproportionate, lunatic two-tier justice, two-tier policing. Go to Leeds, the Harefield riots. Remember those? Ethnic riots. And the police pulled out for 5 hours and let the rioters get on with it. People going the next day, look at the scenes of destruction. Well, if the police had stayed there, perhaps the scenes of destruction would have been somewhat less. Also, remember Birmingham? While these riots were going on around the country, mostly white and working class, people angry about the migrant crisis, people suspecting, by the way, Mike, that the perpetrator of the Southport murderers might be linked to illegal immigration or migration and might be a terrorist. Two-tier Kia saying, absolutely not true, they're far-right thugs. Well, they weren't that far off the mark, but you got to Birmingham, the Muslim community rose up themselves, furious about all these white working class riots. So they have a riot in which one white guy was stabbed outside a pub. No coppers to be seen. They pulled out, and the next day the senior officer of West Midlands Police made a speech about having to work with our stakeholder partners in order to police this in the appropriate way. In other words, they actually admitted, they actually went on to telly to essentially say that because this was a riot by Muslims, we treated it in a very different way to what we would have treated a white working class riot. Two-tier policing, it's obvious. And yet, people at the heart of government, people who work at the Home Office, think that because we believe that, we're far-right extremists. How dare they?
Absolutely. And you only have to see what the Prime Minister did. So the Prime Minister came onto television and said that he hadn't said anything about the Southport evil killer because it would prejudice the trial. But before the people involved who were alleged to have been involved in the Southport disorder went to trial, he went on television and described them all as right-wing thugs. So he's prepared to prejudice one set of trials, but not another. And then the most extreme version of this, Kevin, I think, is the photograph that was released of the Southport. I'm not going to name it because he's an evil bastard, and he doesn't need to. We don't need to name him. We just know he's an evil killer. But the way that the police pussyfooted around with the CPS and released that ridiculous choir boy, the Welsh choir boy photograph.
Yeah.
And instead of the mugshot, everybody else who's ever charged, they have this awful mugshot where, it's a woman who's got no makeup on and looks a complete mess, or some bloke who's been dishevelled in the cells. And it's almost released to sort of ridicule them and show what they're like. But with him, it was quite different. So once again, we have these different decision-making. And there was an excellent article today by Trevor Phillips in The Sun, the renowned black journalist. He's very, very Trevor, straight, very honest and straight about these things. And he's highlighted as colour played a part in how people have retreated from reporting things. So when they came out with this definition of Islamophobia, people started to panic and didn't report things to prevent because they were worried about what others would perceive them. We saw this at the Manchester Arena where the security guard didn't stop the killer because he was going to blow himself up because he thought it might be accused of racism. So we see the consequences of this fear that's been created. The left have created a fear of saying anything about, is there a problem in this particular ethnic minority or whatever else? And the results of this are people being murdered and blown up in Manchester, little girls being stabbed hundreds of times in Southport, and all these other crimes. And it is not only two-tier policing, it is two-tier criminal justice. And what I would say, though, what to add to our woes, this isn't just here. It's in all over Western Europe. I was in Germany after the sex attacks on New Year's Eve, advising the police there. The authorities tried to cover that up. In Sweden, they've done the same. I mean, God help us, but let's hope President Trump takes us over and puts an end to this nonsense.
I wish. And if you remember, when quizzed about, when he was specifically asked about the problem, the scourge of two-tier policing right after the Southport riots, this is what the Prime Minister did. He literally said, what about the problem of two-tier policing? He went like this. He ended the interview, just went, "That's not an issue," and walked off. It is an issue. It's a very, very serious issue, and the authorities are trying to pretend, they're gaslighting us by trying to pretend it's not a thing. It's a thing, and it's a scourge. It's a really sinister stain on our society at the moment. The police are not colourblind, and they police different communities differently, different types of people differently. As you say, why on earth did they release a picture? I'll name him, what the hell, Axel Rudikabana, where after he was arrested. Normal process, you release a current picture, perhaps relatives will give you one, perhaps you take one in the cell, you release the picture. They released a picture of him as an angelic 12-year-old choir boy, and I'll tell you why, Mike, because they didn't want us to think too badly of him, because he's a young man of colour. Now, call me controversial, but I tend to think badly of young men of colour or young men of any persuasion who stab little girls to death in a Taylor Swift dance class. You know, the thinking behind that. Let's put out a nice picture of him. Let's put a nice picture of this guy. It beggars belief, doesn't it?
It does beg a belief, but what it does, what we've got at the moment, and we've got to hope here, because we can challenge these things now. 5-10 years ago, it would have been shut down straight away. I think the momentum is with us to challenge this sort of behaviour and say, why is this happening? Why are you allowing this to go on? Because they know on the back foot, you can see already that Cooper, the Home Secretary, has dismissed this report. Even they are politically savvy enough to know that this is a disaster. But what you have is, and I've said this before, these people are addicted to an ideology, a cult, a new religion of this left liberal leaning. And this cult believes that in multiculturalism, there's a hierarchy of victims, and at the bottom of the heap are white working class men, and then white working class women, I suppose.
Yeah.
And what happens is, if anybody challenges this, if anybody says, look, this hasn't worked out so well, let's look at crime rates committed by certain groups. If you look at Albanians or Somalis or whatever else. And then again, Trevor Phillips has done wonderful work being honest about this, and that's what we need, to be honest about it. But to these people, you are challenging not just a policy, you are challenging an absolute religious conviction that multiculturalism is wonderful, that if there is terrorism, it's far-right terrorism. They'll bang on about the far right, yet since in the last 25 years, 94% of terrorist deaths in this country have been caused by Islamists. Yeah. So that it's incredible. How can they bang on about far right when they know what the real problem is? It's utter nonsense, Kevin.
I was just saying exactly that to Rod Liddle, that you know, they stick their head in the sand and they say, oh, we've got this, but yes, we have a Islamic terrorism problem. We have a massive far right terrorism problem as well. No, we don't. We have a massive Islamist terrorism problem. As you say, 94% of all deaths in this country due to terrorism were due to Islamic terrorism. The biggest threat from terrorism in this country is by Islamic extremists. End of. And yet this entire report sought to deflect away from that. You know, we seek also to say that, you know, that Southport killer is not a terrorist. I say a guy with an Al-Qaeda manual and enough rice in poison to kill thousands of people is probably a terrorist. It is no other country in the world goes out of their way to not call a terrorist a terrorist. We are terrified in this country, for reasons of racism and Islamophobia, of calling terrorists terrorists, and it's got to stop. It's mad.
It is, Matt. And what we have as well, of course, the more they water down this definition of terrorism, or pretend that the massive threat is not, it's not Islamism, is that people get reported to that prevent. A vicar gets reported because he says the Bible, reads out the Bible views on homosexuality, or a schoolboy gets reported for calling somebody else a silly name. And all these things deflect away from what they should be doing and their true mission. If we know the facts, 94%, 94% of their time should be focused on Islamic terrorism. But it's not, because because we like to pretend that's not the real threat. And you hear senior ex-police officers like Neil Basu banging on about the far right as big a threat as Islamist terrorists, when the stats don't add up. But these people are not driven by facts or statistics. They're driven by religious zeal and believing in a cult of multiculturalism, and that's the problem we have.
Absolutely, Mike. Very strong words, well said. Listen, we'll go to break now, and I want to talk about this intriguing case of the Wimbledon motorist, the woman who drove into a school a couple of years ago, if you remember, a prep school, and it was a terrible accident, killed 2 little 8-year-old girls. Well, she's been rearrested, this motorist, in very strange circumstances. A couple of years ago, it was ruled that she had an epileptic fit, some kind of seizure, had no recollection of what happened. Well, they've rearrested her and reopened the case. What is that about? We'll talk about that after these messages.
Home Office, so mainly Yvette Cooper, and it's like an internal report that they asked to happen. And this report has basically come back with all these findings about the definition of extremism and just lots of kind of crime and home affairs issues. But then what's happened with this report is that it seems as if the Home Office have kind of rejected all of the information and the recommendations in this report. So that kind of begs the question of what the purpose of commissioning this report was in the first place.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A couple of questions for you. I'm still talking to Mike Neville. We'll go back to him in just a second. First of all, do you believe, as Mike was just saying, he's a former copper, served with distinction for many a long year, Scotland Yard and everything. He believes there's two-tier policing. I've spoken to loads of other coppers who say it's definitely a thing. That the police forces approach people of colour, communities of colour, Islamic communities differently to the way they approach white British communities, white British people. No doubt about it. They treat ethnic communities with kid gloves and tend to come down on white working class people like a ton of bricks. Two-tier policing. Do you believe that? I believe that. Mike Neville believes that, but if you do believe that, the people at the Home Office think you are a far-right extremist. They think you're a thug. Let me know what you think about that. 0344499 1000. I also want to get your take on the case of Ebu Jessa, 41-year-old Gambian, who in 2015 went to jail for 6 years for raping a drunk woman at his Watford flat. Nasty piece of work he is. When he came out, or after coming out, he has fought deportation 6 times, successfully. The Home Office has failed to deport him 6 times, and the last time, when they had the temerity to put him in somewhere called the Colnbrook Immigration Removal Centre, that's near Heathrow Airport, specifically for deportees, a High Court judge ruled, well, he shouldn't have been in there because there was no realistic chance of deporting him. Why not? And therefore, it was ordered that Mr. Jessa, rapist, former jailbird, should be paid and has been paid substantial compensation. So that's probably in 6 figures. 100,000, 200,000 of your money, my money. High Court judge, rapist, not even here illegally, should be back in Gambia. What on earth is going on? Home Office still trying to deport him. He's still here, but he's now got lots of money because we paid him compensation. Your thoughts, please. 0344499 1000. Let's go back to Mike Neville. Mike, I want to get your take on the strange case, really, of the woman driver who 2 years ago, back in July 23, I always remember the story, in her very flashy, expensive Land Rover, crashed through the school gates of a prep school in Wimbledon, very posh area, all right on Wimbledon Column, smashed into the school. The kids there, the little kids at the prep school, were celebrating the end of term, having a bit of a party with some parents, I do believe, and 2 of the poor little mites, 8 years old both, were killed. Now, the driver was 47 years old. She was called Claire Fremantle. And she maintained that she suffered an epileptic fit and had no recollection whatsoever of this incident. Now, this sort of thing does happen. People have heart attacks and strokes, and, you know, it's not uncommon for that to cause accidents on the road, as you might imagine. But what happened in June 24, the Crown Prosecution Service, and by extension the police, accepted her story and said, OK, case closed, nothing to see here. This was a medical incident. She had an epileptic fit and therefore cannot be blamed. Today, they've reopened the case. They've rearrested her. So that's a year on. Or the best parts, what are we talking about? Not a year on. Well, it's about 7 months on.
6 weeks.
7 months on that they've reopened the case and they've rearrested her. Now, my question to you, we can't get too much into the details of the case because it is a live investigation. But surely, when she was exonerated on the grounds of an epileptic fit, and by the way, she said she'd never had one before, the police would have have got medical verification for this. Surely they'd have gone to, you know, probably got not 1 but 2 medical opinions. Yes, this woman suffered an epileptic fit and cannot be blamed. How would, if they didn't do that, what the hell is going on? How can they reopen the case if they had absolute definite proof or definite medical evidence or testimony that she had an epileptic fit. I mean, do you think it's possible they just didn't do that job properly? What's going on here?
It seems very, very strange, Kevin, doesn't it? We take it back to when it happened, just as Wimbledon started at the beginning of July 2023, and there's enormous delays, in the sense that they bailed her out till the September, and then it was till the February, and then a decision was made in June. And this all seems to be as a result of pressure from the parents who rightly want a full investigation. And what struck me as odd today is the comments from the Detective Chief Inspector who was asking for any witnesses. Well, surely if they had witnesses and appeals, they should have been done at the time. And also the Met was claiming they didn't have enough, the delays were due to not having enough specialist investigators. Well, despite most police officers' dislike of the traffic department, these guys are very, very skilled. There are sergeants in the traffic branch who are very, very skilled at investigating accidents, seeing how they occurred. And then as far as the other things go, you would expect, as you said, the doctors to have done toxicology, see what she'd eaten and drank, or if there's any evidence of any illegal substances or whatever. That's the usual standard thing. And also doctors who are very senior to come forward and verify the possibility that she'd had one of these fits. And then the vehicle, there are enough vehicle examiners, forensic vehicle examiners, to have a look at it to see if there's any faults. It seems just very, very odd that they're making appeals for witnesses and whatever else at a time when we're now 18 months after those two little girls, Selena and Nuria, were tragically killed in the most awful circumstances. And it just doesn't seem good enough.
And we do recall that immediately after this incident, Ms. Claire Fremantle, completely deleted all of her online activities, all of her profiles. And we heard that she had hired the most expensive lawyers known to man. Nothing wrong with that. She's got every right to do that, of course. But I would have thought, if you were on this case, Mike, and somebody claimed, look, I had an epileptic fit, you would have got two opinions at least from eminent doctors, professors, whoever, to confirm, yes, this woman definitely had an epileptic fit. She definitely suffers from epilepsy. You'd have got that, wouldn't you? Two opinions. I just don't. I don't understand how it is.
No, neither do I.
That the police have reopened the case, because they should have made it an open and shut case a year ago, shouldn't they?
Absolutely. And what you have here is the time as well. Those parents are going through agony. They're going through agony that their child has been stolen away from them. And what they can expect is an expedient police inquiry, not one which takes months and months and months. These things that you say are not difficult to arrange. When there's been a death, there's a high priority on an investigation. And so to organise eminent doctors to examine them is not an issue. To find people who will examine the vehicle, who will look at the scene of the accident, those experts, they're easily called upon. These matters should be cleared up within days or weeks. They shouldn't be taking months, which just piles agony on the people who are left behind. It's not good enough.
And the parents of these poor kids, and don't forget other kids were injured as well, they basically said to the police, your investigation has been thoroughly unsatisfactory. And under duress, the police have had to reopen the case, and they've rearrested this woman. It seems to me that we can conclude that all was not well with the original police approach to this case. So that's a fair conclusion, isn't it?
It is absolutely awful. And all the Metropolitan Police, I was proud to be a Scotland Yard detective. And I know people now who don't say they've been in the Met because they're almost ashamed of it. And it's just tragic that the trust and confidence in policing is at rock bottom. We used to be a country where people admired the police. People would come here and say we were the best police in the world. And all this is being thrown away. And it's just sad to see. And it's awful that it's taken the parents of two deceased children to force the Met into doing this again. I can't understand it, because, as I say, my impression, my experience of dealing with traffic officers in that field is that they're highly experienced and they have skills and they would be able to do those reports very, very quickly.
And one last point, if they've got it wrong about Claire Fremantle, they're putting, they've rearrested her. And if they've got it wrong about her, that she doesn't deserve this, I mean, they're putting her through quite an ordeal. As I say, we heard that she was driving a very flashy car. That's about 200 grand's worth of car. She apparently hired very expensive lawyers. I would have thought that if she's in the clear here, she might have a case against the police. They're putting her through hell again. It's a mess, isn't it?
It is a mess because, again, if somebody has a genuine medical condition, something that they cannot help, and they've killed 2 children, that's something you've got to live with for the rest of your life. So, it's a mess if she's guilty, and it's a mess if she's innocent. And the parents are left with this. But I can only praise the parents for keeping on and forcing this reopening, because there's obviously unsatisfactory things that they're aware of and no doubt will come to light. And the tragedy is it will damage that trust and confidence in policing that just needs to be restored, because we need a fair and honest police force that people trust. And as we've been discussing this evening, that's just not happening at the moment.
Yeah, I've got to say, looking at the details, this case seems like a complete shambles. It really does. Another police cock-up. Mike, really brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Mike Neville, the ex-Scotland Yard detective, chief inspector, not superintendent. He should have been, though. When we come back, we'll take your calls. 0344 499 1000. You know what we're talking about. Are you a far-right extremist if you believe in 2-tier policing? That makes me a far-right extremist. People at the Home Office probably think I would be anyway. And also, I want to know what you think about that rapist that we don't seem to be able to get rid of, and who a High Court judge, he's a rapist. He's a foreign rapist. He's from Gambia. He is an illegal immigrant. He did 6 years in jail, and we've just paid him a substantial amount of compensation because we put him into the wrong kind of detention centre. That would be hundreds of thousands, at least £100,000. It's just, what do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Let's talk after these messages. Stay where you are.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'll read a couple of messages before we go to the phones. This is from James in Hitchin. If only we still had cops like Mike Neville and Peter Blexley. I couldn't agree with you more, James. Total common sense and not afraid to call it how it is. In my opinion, if people in these positions of power choose to ignore the bloody obvious and something goes wrong on their watch, like Rotherham, they should have their pensions revoked, whether in or out of service, and stripped of any titles. Yeah, just sack them. Just sack them. There's not enough responsibility. You're absolutely right, James. Nobody ever seems to get punished for the appalling screw-ups that happen day in, day out in this administration, in the authorities, you know, the police, the teachers, social workers, government, politicians. You know, we stumble from one balls up to the next. Nobody ever gets the blame. Whoever wrote that report, that ridiculous extremism report in the Home Office, should be called out and fired, and whoever helped them should be fired. But they won't be. They'll get promoted. You know, although that was officially rejected, that report, by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and Dan Jarvis, the Home Office Minister, I believe, they rejected it. But trust me, that's what they think. They believe this. Keir Starmer made it clear. Far-right thugs, remember that? Or the Southport right? Far-right thugs. Anybody who doesn't agree with this lot, this bunch of sixth-form ideologues that make up our ridiculous cabinet, you know, like student protesters, you know, they're running the country, well, they're wrecking the country more like. Anyone who doesn't agree with them, they go, far-right extremists. Oh, they're far-right. Far right. No. You guys are the extremists, far left extremists. And, you know, the people I've heard ringing in today, you know, good people who've served their country. I've heard a lot of soldiers saying, you know, I served in Afghanistan and Iraq. I served in Northern Ireland. I served my country. And now my country says I'm a far right extremist because I believe in two-tier policing. I believe there is two-tier policing. It's an insult and it's wrong, and it means that Starmer, Cooper, these people in the Home Office, they hate us. They hate us because we don't think like them. And to hell with them, I say. This is from Susan. The Gambian rapist. He will have cost us for his keep, his court case, as well as his reward for raping too. How stupid are we? Absolutely. I mean, this will cost probably, you know, hundreds. His case six times. It's probably it's costing over $1 million now, isn't it? You know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, plus his compensation, which must have been in six figures. We only know it's substantial. Substantial usually means six figures. So yeah, probably talking about £1 million, much more than £1 million we've wasted on this piece of filth, this rapist who did 6 years from Gambia. Send him home, for God's sake. For God's sake. Right, let's go to the phones. I'll read some more messages later on. First, Michelle in London. Hello, Michelle. What would you like to say?
Evening, Kevin. Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Kevin, I've been listening to talkTV all day, and my new resolution was keep off caffeine. Do you know I've had to have 5 cups of tea today? And I think that if anyone knocked on my door, they would think I was Luke Lou. Now, you point everything out, like everyone in your station. It's the best station in the world.
Thank you.
But I really do. I don't know if it's me, but I don't understand why when a government comes in, they should be, the civil servants should go out and a new lot should come in. I don't understand why we don't change things.
Well, look, so every time there's a government, there's a whole set of new civil servants. I'll tell you what I think, Michelle. I think, you know, in practical terms, that would be very, very impossible, you know, because there are tens and tens of thousands of them. But certainly, I think you're making a good point here, because at the top, at the executive level, I think you're right. There should be a change. There should be a changing of the guard. Because these people, come what may, are always the same. They stay in their cushy Whitehall jobs, usually working from home, no matter what the government is. So it would be better, I agree with you, to get senior civil servants who sympathise with the government of the day.
Well, it's not even sympathising. Kevin, I'm so annoyed with the words far right. I'm so annoyed with lessons learned. Oh my God, how the hell did
They never learn lessons. When they say lessons will be learned, what they mean is no lessons will be learned. It's the worst cliche that means exactly the opposite of what they're actually trying to say. Yeah, you like me, I sense, Michelle, you probably believe that there is two-tier policing. And because we believe that, according to the Home Office, we're far-right extremists. What do you make of that?
Kevin, my dad was in the army. I was brought up. Keep Britain tidy. We never had no problems with anybody. I went to school with it. I've got on with everybody. All this is, and it's the Tory government, and I'm really angry with all these, what you call Islam champagne, like people. And people keep giving excuses. Oh, they don't know any different. They don't. You mean to tell me that everybody, and half of these people say, I'm a toolmaker, I live in a council flat, that you don't know about grit, morals, gumption? You don't know, and how can anybody not love their country? And I am ashamed that people who come into this country meant to say that they're running away from this and that, and they come in here and they bring all their baggage. But Kevin, what I want to ask you, which has been bugging me, now all these illegal, and I wish people would look up illegal, right, immigrants, these are all men. Now, when we bring them all into hotels and they haven't got passports, do these civil servants give them passports, British passports, so they can go back to the country that they're lying that they fled and bring their girlfriends or...
Well, they bring their family. They tend to bring their families over when the time is right,
You know, because they have to bring women over to have children, and then they go on our benefits. Now, Kevin, I don't know if there is something in the water, but Donald Trump, to me, this man is just, like you, it's common sense.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah, absolutely.
Where did we go wrong? Now, Kevin, in the 70s, when Labour was in, I was a little girl. We had to queue up for water. There were rats on the street. Rubbish wasn't being picked up. And then we used to have a horse and carriage, bring out any old iron. It used to say, bring out your bodies. What the hell is going on?
Michelle, I'll tell you what's going on. This country's going to hell in a handcart, and we are being governed by left-wing idiots, people who refuse to face the truth, who refuse to face facts, and when confronted with the facts, they go round calling everyone far right. It's pathetic, it's annoying, it's also extremely worrying. We are in the hands of fools. We are in the hands of ideological fools. Keir Starmer will not confront reality. They won't admit that Axel Rudakabana might have been something to do with terrorism. If you had ricin poison and an Al-Qaeda manual, I say there's a fair suspicion that he's dancing around the edges of terrorism at the very least, wouldn't you? And yet, our authorities, no, he's not a terrorist. Do me a favour. Michelle, I've got to go because we've got to go to adverts now. But listen, a really good call, and keep in touch. Call me again. Nice to talk to you. Michelle in London there. Sorry, Dave in Basildon. We'll come to you a bit later because I've got to go to break now. And when we come back, we'll be talking about Just Stop Oil. Talking about idiots. It was Shakespeare last night. They stormed the stage at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. Sigourney Weaver starring in a production of Shakespeare's The Tempest. This didn't come from The Tempest, but it's a bit like, is this the Just Stop Oil moron I see before me? So we'll talk about that next and ask why the hell these middle-class fools, these climate change morons do this, because it doesn't make any difference, does it? 03444991000, that next. Stay tuned.
he said 2.5% by 2030. So there'd be a steady increase in the defence budget between now and then. It would, in real terms, over those years, over £20 billion extra. Labour won't put a date on it, and until they put a date on it, it's funny money. You can't actually run the defence budget, and it's worse because they're threatening to spend £9 billion on renting back the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Just Stop Oil, if we must. Just stop it, will you? Anyway, these dorks, idiots, stormed the West End stage last night and stopped a highly anticipated performance of Shakespeare's The Tempest, starring the Hollywood actress Sigourney Weaver. Pop fact, her real name's Susan. Sigourney's a character, I think, in Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. So she took on that name. But I digress. So Susan Weaver is in the middle of her performance, and these idiots, there they are, they stormed the stage, ruined it for everyone there, unfurled an orange banner, orange paint, all of that, and then the usual virtue signalling speech about fearing for their children. So sorry to stop the show, ladies and gentlemen, but this is very important. We've got to save the planet. And of course, because it was The Tempest, they talked about the global shipwreck of the climate emergency. Very clever. Let's talk to senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, Philip Kisley. Welcome back to the show, Philip. They're going to carry on doing this nonsense, these people. And frankly, it doesn't amount to a hill of beans. They know it doesn't make any difference. We know it doesn't make any difference. Why do you think they're doing it?
Hi, Kev. It's great to talk to you again. I think there are several reasons why they're doing, none of which has anything to do with the climate. Let's just get that out of the way before we start. So in terms of CO2 emissions, Britain is responsible for 0.8% of CO2 emissions, okay? China, on the other hand, is responsible for 33%.
Has it gone up? I always thought it was 28, so 33%. So they're going up the charts. They're rising fast, China. Yep.
They're way at the top. They're the Beatles of CO2 emissions. and if these people really cared about that, they'd be going over to China and taking on the Chinese Communist Party. But what's easier, okay? Taking on the Chinese Communist Party, which isn't the easiest thing in the world to do, or poncing around in Drury Lane. I think it's probably poncing around at Drury Lane. So they don't care. It's nothing to do with that. What it's about them. It's about them as people. It's about, I call it performative narcissism. Okay, it's about me. Look at me. It's the climate equivalent of being non-binary. It's that kind of thing.
Exactly right. That's what it is, isn't it? I mean, that's what I'd always felt. Was this? These are. I mean, they're white. There's very few people of colour in Just Stop Oil. They tend to be white, middle class, called things like Penelope and Polly. And as for the women, that's my little joke there. But seriously, they just want to bring attention on themselves. It's about them. Aren't we wonderful? Unlike you boring little people who like to go to the theatre or have to get to work. We're going to spend our time theatrically, if I can use that word, demonstrating and telling you how much we care for children because of the future threatened by climate change. It is all about them. It's narcissism, isn't it?
Yeah, it's narcissism, and there's a cultish religious aspect to it as well. So you can track it. Okay, so these people will have loved Jeremy Corbyn. They will have been on their hands and knees. Okay, they will be, as I've already said, genderist, non-binary, trans, or whatever, interested in that kind of thing. And of course, they'll be shouting for Hamas as well. So it's a whole set of beliefs that don't have anything really to do with reason or reality. And you can't reason with someone who has a saviour complex, okay? If someone's going to get on the stage and say, I'm going to save you, there's no way you're going to easily change their mind. So that's one thing. I think there's something else as well, Kevin, and I think it's also about social status. You know, this is about high status, good old class snobbery. You know, I'm very sophisticated. I'm very civilized. I care. I'm so well educated. I care much more than you. It's all of that kind of stuff. It's this good old-fashioned virtue signaling, but it's this awful class snobbery as well. It's looking down on people who don't care, you know, or supposedly don't care about this fantasy of, what do we call it now? I mean, is it global boiling? Is it the climate emergency? I've forgotten. Because 50 years ago, or even less than 50 years ago, everyone was terrified that we were all going to freeze to death. You know, so this has changed very, very quickly. And I think there's one other thing as well that we need to bear in mind here. It's also about mental health. You know, you look at the look in their eyes when they do thing. They all have this same look on their faces. It's dead look.
There's a kind of a cult mental sickness about them. I think they're all suffering from the same affliction, some kind of devotion to an idea that they completely bought into. But I think it has superseded for them the actual cause they're supposed to be campaigning about. They just do it because it's like the theatre that they... I mean, I'm saying theatre in the wide sense of the word. This is the theatre that they see themselves as the star of, isn't it?
Yeah, the activism is the end. It's all about... And of course, society is often very much to blame for this as well. They will have these luxury belief degrees. They will be kids who are very, you know, upper middle class, a lot of them. You know, they'll have gone around the world. They'll have flown around the world in aeroplanes.
Yes,
you know?
Of course.
Then they'll go on to their luxury degrees, and the degrees themselves are often about activism. So they're immersed in this on campus. They're immersed in this in their social circles. And of course, once you're in this, you got to step out of it. You know, it's all part of the cult thing, but it's all part of the social thing as well. So it's very difficult for people who are outside of it to say, look, stop this. You know, this is cultish behaviour. It's not about the climate. This is about you. But unfortunately, society, a lot of the time, is, you know, responsible for doing this because we've encouraged it. You know, society, education in particular, the media has encouraged this. You speak out against it, you know, or you even question it. Okay,
you're a climate denier. Climate denier. I love it when they cut that. I'm always getting accused of being a climate denier, and I say it's very hard to deny a climate. You mean I'm a climate change denier? By the way, I don't deny climate change. It would be foolish to do this. The planet always changes. Climate always has, always will. My question about mankind destroying the planet was in terms of carbon emissions. There are a lot of carbon emissions in the days of the dinosaurs. Who was causing it then? I mean, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Before you go, Philip, I haven't got long, but I wanted to get your take on this Home Office report today that says that if you, me, or anyone else suspects that there might be this thing two-tier policing, which, by the way, there obviously is, then we are far-right extremists. Very worrying that people in the heart of government think like this about decent British citizens who fear that justice may not be colourblind in this country.
It's so shocking. It's unbelievable. I mean, when this government came into power, I thought they were going to be bad, but I had no idea they were going to be so terrible. You know, shock. And so I keep thinking back to that poor man who died in prison, Peter Lynch, for campaign and
For his pros, he was a Southport rioter who felt he was very unfairly treated. I think some of those people really were. But of course, this is indicative of exactly what fueled this report. Don't forget, what did Keir Starmer took one look at this riot happening 200 miles north of where he was, or 300 miles, and just he didn't know what the hell was going on. Just far-right thugs. Far-right thugs. It was a lot more complex than that. But the Home Office people and Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper, they hate us. They hate us. They think we're Neanderthal and racist and Islamophobic, and it's very worrying.
It is. I mean, you can't... The problem is that people are so frustrated, angry and frightened, and that's a hell of a cocktail. Right? And if you shut them down and you don't allow them to express themselves and express very real concerns, they will hate you. And I've been around a long time, okay, and I've seen quite a few governments on both sides. I've never experienced the kind of loathing that's pointed at this government at the moment.
Yeah, loathing that we point at them and they point at us. That's not a good situation. I've got to go now, Philip, but we will talk again on this. Philip Kisley from the New Culture Forum. Next up, Labour's obsession with Muslims. That comes up next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're taking your calls in just a little while, about 20 minutes or so. 0344 499 1000. Are you a far-right extremist? Do you believe there might be a thing called two-tier policing? Because if you don't, you haven't been looking. There is two-tier policing, no doubt whatsoever about it. Not worth discussing whether or not it exists. It exists because it does. Everybody knows that. Ask current coppers, ask former coppers like Mike Neville, who was on my show earlier, or Peter Brexley. It's a thing. It definitely goes on. They treat people of colour, Islamic people, Muslims, differently to white people, to white Brits. They just do. It's the way it goes. If you believe that, though, according to the Home Office, a special report, you're a far-right extremist. Are you? What do you think of the fact that people at the heart of government think that about you? That because you have a perfectly decent, honest opinion that there's a scourge in this country and it's called two-tier policing, you're an extremist, you're far right, you're a maniac. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on the case of the rapist, the Gambian rapist who, since 2015, has successfully fought off 6 deportation attempts by the Home Office. And at the last attempt, when we stuck him into a deportation centre, an immigration removal centre, a High Court judge decided that was unwarranted and against his rights, because he wasn't really going to get deported. Why not? So we paid him substantial compensation, probably £100,000 or more. And he's still here, and the Home Office still can't deport him. Your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. And the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. Did you exploit that scourge, that scandal, to spread nasty thoughts about the Muslim community? Because that's what the Home Office think. That if you think that the grooming gangs, you know, who are Muslim men of Pakistani origin, you know, if you think that somehow they were bad, well, according to the Home Office, they weren't even really criminals. It was alleged. It wasn't proved. That's crap. Hundreds of Pakistani men of Pakistani origin, Muslim men, have been convicted and jailed for raping vulnerable white young women. So it's not alleged, it's a fact. What is going on here? 0344 499 1000. And do you wish that we had a Donald Trump running this country? Selena Gomez weeping as all these criminal illegal migrants are deported, rounded up, put in chains, shoved onto aeroplanes and flown back to their home country. Why can't we do that? Why don't we do that? Do you wish you had a Donald Trump in charge of this country to take such strident action? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk in just a little while. But first, let's talk about the Labour Party, really. There's an organisation called the Muslim Council of Britain. They've basically been kind of prohibited for some years now because their views on Israel have been recorded as not exactly what you might expect in polite society. They're not keen on Israel. So the government, successive governments, to be fair, I think the Tory government's had this policy, and now Labour, to its credit, has this policy, a policy of non-engagement with the Muslim Council of Britain due to concerns about extremism within that Islamic group. So non-engagement, as far as the government's concerned, dodgy, extremist, we don't talk to them. Why then was Social Security Minister Sir Stephen Timms and at least 3 other Labour MPs, why were they guests of honour at the Muslim Council of Britain's annual leadership dinner recently? Why? The Tory MP Nick Timothy has questioned whether Timms and co were defying the collective responsibility of the government in that they don't talk to the Muslim Council of Britain, or has there been a change of policy towards what we call the MCB? This strikes me as typical of Labour. They've got this thing about Muslims, about the Islamic community, partly because they think those of us, you know, who worry about Islamic terrorism, because it is a thing, you know, are somehow Islamophobic, are somehow racist, and partly, more to the point, they need the Muslim vote. 4 million or so, I do believe. They need those votes. They'll need them at the next election. So is this more kowtowing to Islam by Labour, who need the numbers? Well, let's talk to historian and broadcaster Rafe Heidel-Manku. Welcome to the show, Rafe.
Great to be back with you.
I mean, this is a problem, isn't it? So Stephen Timms, a distinguished veteran MP, now Social Security Minister, he should not have been at that dinner because the Labour government, like the Tory government before, it does not engage with the Muslim Council of Britain because it has links, or it is suspected of extremism, particularly with its attitude towards Israel. The Labour Party, the Labour government has this problem, doesn't it, that it kowtows constantly to the Muslim community, to Islam. You know, there's nothing wrong with engaging and being respectful, but what this government does is, if we bring up the uncomfortable truth that 94% of deaths in this country due to terrorism have been due to Islamic terrorism, then we're Islamophobic. What we should be worried about, as this report in the Home Office said, is not so much Islamic terrorism, despite the 94% aspect to it. We should be worried about far-right extremism, far-right terrorism. This government sticks its head in the sand and will not confront the reality of the threat of Islamic terrorism, and that's a worry, isn't it?
It's more than a worry. It's a threat to our personal safety and to the security of the nation. And it's, it's the primary function of any government is to defend those two things, the person and the state. And it is failing in that if it is going to put its head in the sand, as you say. Look, it's quite clear that the Labour Party is running scared because, of course, there's what we call the Red-Green Alliance. The alliance between Islam and the left is very famous. And it's one of its key elements is, of course, is anti-Semitism. We've seen a very nasty streak of anti-Semitism in the left. Obviously, amongst, in Islam, there's also a great hotbed, a great bedrock of anti-Semitism amongst many people there too. That's traditionally united them. But to get elected, Keir Starmer had to be seen to the rest of the country to be expunging anti-Semitism. And that's why, of course, when we had the October the 7th and everything that happened with Gaza, he came down very strongly on the side of Israel. And suddenly that dependable Muslim vote that Labour depended on so much vanished. And one of the big stories of the election that hasn't been given enough attention, which you've just spoken about, is the Muslim vote. Yes, Nigel and Reform got 5 MPs, but so too did this Muslim vote with Jeremy Corbyn and 4 other Muslim MPs. And that's only going to get larger now. And of course, we had at the last election, of course, we had cases of Muslim mobs setting fire to Labour constituency offices. We had Labour MPs cowering in their offices in Parliament, requesting that they have panic buttons installed in their houses because they were so fearful of that Muslim vote that they had courted so much. It's very much a case of actually inviting in the very elements that are now undermining it so much. And let's be clear here, questions need to be asked of Sir Stephen Timms, also the other MPs who attended this Muslim Council of Britain event, including the odious Naz Shah, the MP who you remember said that Israel should be removed from the Middle East, and who also liked and retweeted a tweet saying that the victims of the rape gangs should shut their mouths. That's the actual words, for the sake of diversity. She was given an award at this Muslim Council of Britain meeting.
Was she?
And let's be clear.
I bet she was, yeah.
The Muslim Council of Britain is an odious organisation. In the Labour government, as you mentioned, cut off ties with it in 2009 because of its links to extremism, which included actually during another altercation between Hamas and Gaza, MCB figures signed a declaration essentially calling for attacks on Royal Navy British vessels as well as on Jews around the world. Then in 2015, the Tory government had a review into the Muslim Council of Britain and found that actually it was very closely linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, a sinister anti-Semitic organization founded in the 1920s by admirers of Hitler and the Nazis. And they actually sent people to the Nuremberg rallies in Germany in the 30s. And this organization has been banned in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, and in Egypt. And yet there are strong connections between it and this Muslim Council of Britain. We need to understand that this has a presence in the UK. So what on earth is a minister of the Crown doing attending an event with with this organization. And just yesterday, they elected a new Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. This chap has said that children should be Muslim first, and rather than British first. He said Muslims shouldn't go to New Year's celebrations because they're anti-Muslim. And he's essentially, and his rival has admired the Iranian Revolution and the Ayatollahs, you know. And so this is what we're dealing with. And I don't know whether he's naive, because Sir Stephen Timms in 2010 was stabbed by an Al-Qaeda
macheted almost to death. Indeed.
Yeah. So maybe he's just, I don't know. Maybe he's, his heart's in the right place and he's being naive. That's the best we can hope for.
Yeah, I mean, this government, the Labour Party, and I've got to stress this, most Muslims, perfectly decent people. We have a problem with Islamic extremists, as we were just saying, that Islamic terrorism is responsible for 94% of the deaths through terrorism in this country. So to say, let's worry about far-right extremism is absolutely nonsense. It's blinkered. The thing we have to worry about is Islamic terrorism, but this government has a policy of appeasement towards Islamic extremists. There's no doubt about it. Why on earth will the government, neither the government nor the police nor the authorities, admit that just maybe this little piece of filth, Axel Rudakabana, the awful person who murdered those poor kids in Southport, the fact that he's found with enough ricin poison to murder or to kill thousands of people. He's got an Al-Qaeda training manual written by an Islamic extremist. And our authorities, lawyers, police, coppers, politicians are going out of their way to come up with reasons to say this guy's got nothing to do with terrorism. Now, I'll accept, he's not a fully fledged member of Al-Qaeda or ISIS or something like that. But to just dismiss any suggestion of terrorism is just mad. It's insane. It is sticking our head in the sand like ostriches. And as you said, Rafe, it's dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what he did was an act of terrorism. Now, I'm going to take slight issue here because I'm not sure that we actually can say clearly that there was an ideological motivation.
Yeah, but Rafe, do we need do we need a crystal clear ideological element to it? You don't really, do you?
No, you don't. If you're terrorizing a population, then you are a terrorist, right? The clue is in the name. But, Islamic extremism and Islamic terrorism is the greatest threat we face in terms of terrorism. But there's another force existing in this country, which is the thing that actually we don't discuss enough, and it's probably just as big as Islamic extremism, and that is the fact that asylum seekers who come from war-torn countries and immigrants who come from war-torn countries or very violent countries and their children, if they're born in this country, are more prone to violence and criminality. And all of the sociological evidence shows that, the psychological evidence shows that. It's been settled on this point. And nobody in the media and in government is brave enough to discuss this very fact. So you don't actually necessarily need the ideology there. We know with Axel Rudakabana, he was obsessed by the Rwandan genocide. Now, that wasn't a Muslim genocide, the Rwandan genocide.
No.
And he was obsessed with the Mau Mau in Kenya. He was obsessed with the extermination of the Native American populations and also the atrocities committed by other tribes in North Africa, by the ethnic clans killing each other in the Sudan and so forth. This was a guy who basically was obsessed by violence. A lot of this coming, of course, from his background. And we don't discuss enough the fact that the Nottingham murderer, the Manchester Arena bomber, the assassin of Sir David Amess, Axel Rudakabana, and many others, these are either asylum seekers or the children of asylum seekers. Yeah. The fact that he was born in Wales is irrelevant. And what we got from the government was any attempt to link those murders of those poor girls in Southport to the asylum system. That was misinformation, we were told. And that's how they could discredit all those protests. It wasn't misinformation. No. Because this boils down to the asylum system and importing people who are psychologically disturbed emotionally dead and stunted, and that applies to all the hundreds of thousands of people that we've imported across the channel in those dinghies, young men of fighting age who have witnessed and participated in quite often horrific crimes, who are hardened from that experience and who've come here, who can never adjust, who are a strain on our mental health services and on our benefit system and are a risk to the nation. That's a discussion we should be having alongside Islamic extremism.
Well, our politicians now, our Labour politicians, our government, just have this massive, strange urge to call bad guys good guys, and for us to understand. My last question to you, Rafe, going slightly off-piste, why do you think the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, yesterday, in her glowing tribute to the Holocaust, when she said she was lighting a candle for all those millions of people who were murdered in the Nazi Holocaust, the horror of it, blah, 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 all the people who lost their lives. What do you think in that tweet? Very evocative of her lighting a candle. Brought a tear to my eye, actually. Why do you think she didn't ever use the word Jews or Jewish?
Well, I think we know full well, because she wrote that tweet not thinking about the Jews. She wrote that tweet thinking about Muslim voters and thinking about left-wing supporters of the Labour Party. That's what's so sickening about this whole episode. The Jews are increasingly being erased from the Holocaust. March the 25th is the annual day to remember the transatlantic slave trade. Now, imagine someone putting out a tweet like that and not having the word Africans anywhere in it, right? That would be unimaginable, right? It would be unconscionable. There would be an absolute outcry. So for her, or for Good Morning Britain for that matter, and many others, not to mention the Jews by name, it's especially bad this year because this is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. World leaders are gathered literally at Auschwitz, and even on that day, you don't mention the Jews. I mean, it's absolutely unthinkable.
Well, Rafe, to be fair, it's only 6 million of them got killed, so it's an easy oversight for her to make. As you say, I'm sure this isn't at all relevant, but if she doesn't get the Muslim vote in her constituency, she loses her seat. But I'm sure that didn't influence that tweet in one bit whatsoever. Rafe, excellent to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time and wise thoughts. Rafe Heidelmann-Koo, their historian and broadcaster. What do you make of all that? The Labour Party, the Labour government, they do appease extremists. They appease Islamic extremists. The pussyfooting and the mollycoddling, really, of this Southport killer, I think was due to the fact he was the son of migrants and he was a young man of colour. And therefore the police put out this picture of him as an angelic 12-year-old, as I said earlier. Do they think somehow we'll think better of him then? Well, I didn't like him much because he murdered 3 little kids, 3 little 8-year-old girls who were dancing in the Taylor Swift dance class. Didn't like him much, but now I've seen that nice little picture of him as an angelic choir boy, age 12, I'm really thinking a lot better of him. What on earth was going through their minds? We're taking your calls next. You might want to try to answer that question. 0344 499 1000. You next. Stay tuned.
They say it's about 68 and a half.
Oh, right, okay.
68 and 3/4, approaching 69. If you look at metrics from supermarkets on how much food we eat, the population is somewhat bigger. Now, that could be a skewed metric, we may all be a bit overweight, but I think there's probably some truth there. And the reality is that if you just look at the evidence, in the 1980s, when we had almost zero net migration, guess what? The economy grew faster at between 2.5% and 3.5% every single year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'll read some of your messages in just a little while. We're going to go straight to the phones again in just a little while. But first, we'll do them bit by bit tonight. A few WhatsApp voice notes. The first one is from Anna, and it's on government funding.
Evening, Kev. My son's just been listening to your good self. Himself and all of his friends in their 20-somethings are all avid reform supporters, having been crazy socialists at university. He suggested that, have you ever thought about the copious amounts of money that come from Saudi? Do you think possibly it's being slipped into the back pockets of certain people? Not suggesting anyone in particular. Ha, 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 Labour. Cheers, Kev. Bye-bye.
It's an interesting point, Anna. I'll tell you what, our approach to Saudi Arabia is somewhat tempered and softened due to the fact that we need their oil and we need them to buy our weapons, which they then bomb Yemen with. Yes, government funding from foreign sources should be viewed with some suspicion. I'm not sure if any of those people in government are taking backhanders. I don't believe this government are corrupt in that way. I just think they're mad sixth form student style ideologues who are wrecking this country with their absurdly juvenile politics. But they're not so juvenile that they won't talk to Saudi Arabia and encourage Saudi Arabia to part with its cash. Yes, there you are. But good WhatsApp voice note, Anna, and regards to your son and all his friends. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Right, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Dave in Basildon. Hello, Dave. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, Kev. Great show.
Thank you.
I think a large part of the problem with the two-tier policing won't be solved until we get rid of the police and crime commissioners. They've politicised the police.
Great point.
And all police promotions need to come from the rank and file, like Peter Blexley, Mike Neville. Mm-hmm. And until that is changed, and it was the Tories who brought these in, and Labour are not going to do anything about it. And yes, they hate us. They hate us with a passion because they, as you say, they are just total ideologues. It's their incompetence. They're just utter appalling. The Tories were hopelessly incompetent. Mm-hmm. We could easily double our defence budget, take the migrants back to France, all the illegals, where the French would love it because no more would come. Stop all the legal aid. That's what we've got to stop.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
the lefty lawyers want to promote it, let them do it themselves. And anybody that wants them here, let them have one undocumented migrant at their own expense in their own home. And if they've got no room for it, like they always say, well, let them have their bed or share their bed or share the bed with their wife or their kids, because they do like to share the bed with our young girls in Rotherham and all places like that. So, let them have a little bit of it themselves, and they might...
when you talk about, I'm with you, Dave, and when you talk about this government's incompetence, you're right, they are very incompetent. But then again, the Tories were incompetent as well. But this government, though, this lot, Keir's crew, are incompetent because they're ideologues. They've sat around for 14 years going, well, you wait until we're in power. We'll bring in our socialist ideas and produce an absolutely idyllic Britain. You know, and get that. So they literally thought all this crap was going to work. They literally thought if we take all the money off the private sector and give it to the public sector, you know, if we tax individuals to the hilt and give that money, you know, to train drivers, give them 80 grand a year, that'll be really good for the country. Well, they're putting into practice all their socialist, useless ideas, and it's a disaster. It's a disaster. So their incompetence is ideologically driven.
Oh, yeah, but Theresa May and Boris were almost as bad. It might not have been quite as... Well, Boris was an ideologue with his green...
Oh,
insanity.
God, don't get me started on that. He's a Lib Dem, that guy.
Punishment. It's a punishment for voting Brexit. A lot of this.
Yes, I think you're right. Absolutely. You know, they hate us because we voted Brexit. They hate us because we think there's two-tier policing. They hate us because we're slightly in fear because 94% of all deaths in this country due to terrorist incidents were by terrorists from the Islamic persuasion. They hate us. Yep. For all these very real concerns. We're talking about reality. We're talking about the truth. They're living in a fantasy world, sticking their heads in the sand like ostriches, and it's not going to end well, I'll tell you. Dave, great call. Thank you very much for ringing. Call me again. Dave in Basildon there. I think we've got time. Let's go to our friend Tarquin in London. Hi, Tark.
Dear boy, how are you?
I'm very, very well. What would you like to say?
Drain the blob.
Yeah.
Drain the blob. Stand clear of the sausages, please.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, what did you make of this extraordinary report? I mean, OK, it was rejected by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and the Home Office Minister, Dan Jarvis. But I think... that's pretty reflective of the way Keir Starmer and most of his cabinet think about us plebs, that we're Neanderthals, that we have far-right opinions. You know, two-tier policing isn't a thing, and if they believe that, they're far-right extremists. They're trying to blame Muslims for the gang rapes. That's a racist, Islamophobic, and so on and so forth. That's what they think about. They think we are far-right racist extremists, and we're talking about millions of normal, decent Brits.
And what's more concerning, adding on to that, Kevin, is that had the Home Office and Yvette Cooper decided that they would endorse that report, would that mean that everybody with common sense in the UK would now be on a list at GCHQ, at MI5, because we'd all be on terrorist watch lists?
Yeah, exactly right. And by the way, this report, among other ludicrous suggestions, called for an upping of the number of non-crime hate incidents recorded by police. They wanted them to step them up. Successive governments have said you should tail off a bit on all of this. What is the point? What on earth are non-crime incidents for? What do they achieve? Why are the police pissing around with something that isn't crime? Why are they doing it?
It's the erstwhile version of the 1917-18 Bolshevik, what they called the Red Terror. Look it up. It's horrible. It's what they used to do in Bolshevik Russia. The Red Terror, Kevin. Disgusting.
Well, yeah, we've got problems with this government. We really do. And as I say, they hate us. They hate us.
They hate us.
And frankly, I don't like to indulge in such extreme emotions, but it's kind of feelings mutual. Do you know what I'm saying?
Indeed so.
Tarquin, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You keep on calling. Take care now. That's Tarquin in London. I'll read some messages, some more WhatsApp voice notes after these messages, so stay right where you are.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, everybody, let's stop the madness. This country is going mad. If you want to see a sane country or an emerging sane country across the Atlantic, have a look at Donald Trump's America. That country, that nation, that great nation is emerging into the sunlight of common sense. We here in Britain are trapped in the darkness of insanity, of socialist insanity imposed by this ridiculous government that will not face reality. And if we talk of reality, if we talk about two-tier policing, we talk about the grooming gangs, then they call us racists. They call us far-right extremists. It's sick. It's sick. Your thoughts? 03444991000. Let's go to another voice note, and it's a story we haven't covered tonight, but it is worth talking about. Council tax is set to soar, set to rocket. Your council tax bills are going to be even higher, and Martin would like to talk about that.
I just wanted to say something about the whole council tax being increased around the country. I think the biggest problem with that isn't the increase, it's what the money will actually be spent on. These lot can't spend what we're paying already on appropriate services, so who's to say that what they spend more of, if they're going to put it up 10, 15, 20%, who's going to say what they're going to spend that on is going to be useful to us as paying customers? I think the biggest thing that needs to be sorted out is accountability. The council tax, even our taxes, need to be accountable. What's it being spent on? Who's actually documenting what's being spent on? And where's all this waste going? Because we can't keep working and paying taxes day in, day out, or something's gone wrong. I'll tell you what, let's bill the taxpayer again, shall we? That isn't right. Something needs to change. Some accountability needs to be held, and they need to stop wasting our funds.
Martin, very good point. I tell you where loads of the money goes. It goes to paying the highly paid, the massively remunerated executives, the chief executives and the various other, big wigs who run local town halls. I mean, there's loads of boroughs around the country, city boroughs, in town boroughs, where the chief executive of a little town or a fairly small city, earns something like £700,000 or £500,000 a year. They earn something like 3 to 4 times more than the Prime Minister. How can someone who's running a town or a city be worth 3 to 4 times more than the man who's running the entire country? Because they're ripping us off. That's why they're charging you a lot of council tax, so they can stick it into their own pockets. As for potholes, rubbish collection, getting your bins, forget about it. They don't care about that. That's where that money goes. Here's a quick message. This is from Gary. Kevin, I don't understand why deportation of foreign nationals who have committed a serious crime here isn't automatic. I don't either. On their release day, they should be taken straight from prison to the airport and packed off home on the first available flight, and to hell with their human rights. They gave them up when they decided to break the law here. Gary, I couldn't agree with you more, but we don't deport them. I mean, I've done a story like last couple of weeks. I've done towards the end of last year, rather, 2 stories of 2 paedophiles, convicted paedophiles. Went to jail 2-3 years each for sexually abusing children. Both of them had families. They had a wife and kids. They had their own kids, and both of them were allowed to stay by the European Court of Human Rights because they ruled that these paedophiles had a right to a family life. What about the safety of children where they live? The safety of children generally in this country. Don't they have a right? Don't children in this country have a right to safety? Because our courts, our system, our legal system prioritises the rights to a family life of a paedophile over children's safety in this country. Go figure. 03444991000. Let's go back to the phones. First of all, two-tier pleasing. Let's talk to Dennis in Surrey. Hello, Dennis. What would you like to say?
Hi, good evening. When it comes to two-tier policing, personally for me, I think it's multi-tier. The left tend to do it in different ways.
So, sorry, say again. Do you think there is two-tier policing?
Yes, I think it's even multi-tiered.
It's more than two. Multi-tiered. Yeah, multi-tiered. Yeah. Okay. Okay. In what way?
In the way that it's applied differently depending on what the situation is.
Yeah, but I mean, in a sense, that's two-tier, isn't it? I mean, what we're talking about is the way that the police tend to treat people of colour, Islamic people, Muslims, people from ethnic communities differently to the way they treat the white, particularly the white working class here in Britain. I mean, we saw it in the summer. Would you agree?
Yes, I totally agree with that. We see that in the community every day. Yeah. And it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help, especially, I'm Black African, I'm a migrant. It doesn't help us in any way. Mm-hmm. Because it brings discord.
No, you're exactly right, Dennis. I mean, what the law should be, it should treat me and you exactly equally. It should be utterly colourblind. It should be blind to class, creed or colour. And yet it's not. It's not in this country. It's not just two-tier policing, it's two-tier justice as well. You know, why did it take, 5-6 months before those two guys at Manchester Airport were finally charged for attacking police officers, for allegedly punching them to hell? Why did it take so long? Why? Why did it take 6 months for them to be charged, and yet the white working class rioters in Southport were charged, in court, convicted and in jail within 3-4 days? That is two-tier policing, Dennis. Good call. Thank you very much for ringing. Dennis in Surrey there. We've now got time to talk to Ernie in Bexley Heath. Hello, Ernie. What would you like to say?
Just about this Rudy Cabana turnout.
Yeah.
For the crime he'd done, surely he should have faced hanging.
Well, yeah, but we don't have the death penalty in this country.
No, but why don't they bring it back for police officers and other people? If you've got sufficient grounds... Child killing,
yeah. I tend to agree with you.
Why should we... Yeah, but it's the taxpayer that's paying to keep them in jail.
£51,000 a year.
Cheap, yeah. A lump of rope is very cheap, and just drop them.
Why do you think it has to... I mean, you know, the thing about hanging is it's very theatrical. You know, it's a very final piece of theatre.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be hanging? I mean, I don't know why we can't put people to death. Well, why not put people to death? Well, hang on a second. Hang on, Ernie, I'm talking. Why can't we put people to death with a humane injection?
Yeah, that's true. But perhaps hanging is... like a symbolic.
I don't want to. Yeah, but I don't want to enjoy the theatre of it.
No one does. But then it's just sending a message to people. This is what you have done to other people. You've injured them so deeply in what you've done.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I'm with you.
Punished, but I agree with you. Yeah, give them. It's even cheaper because of the injection.
Yeah. I mean, what I do agree, where we do agree is, you know, I used to not really have any strong feelings about the death penalty, but I look at those three poor little girls who were stabbed to death in Southport. Just look at their faces, and you think the monster who did this for no apparent reason. Surely the state should have the option here of execution. I don't think it turns us into a savage nation if we put the death penalty back into our legislation, back into our punishment system. I don't think it makes us savage. And we would execute people once in a blue moon. It would be very, very rare. So why not? I agree with you.
But would this send a message to all these people that are arguing people to think, oh, if I do that, I'm not going to go to jail, I'm going to be...
Well, the thing is, I don't think most punishments are much of a deterrent, and I don't think hanging. I don't think that the death penalty is necessarily deters people from terrible crimes.
No.
I don't think long prison sentences do. People commit offences believing they're going to get away with it. They don't. the idea of the deterrent, I think, is overstated.
Yeah, but they do, don't they? They do get away with it.
Yeah, they usually do in this country.
Yeah.
Ernie, we are on the same page, and I take your point. Good to talk to you, mate. Thank you very much for the call. Ernie in Bexley Heath. Let's go to break now. When we come back, another couple of voice notes, WhatsApp voice notes, and we'll go back to the phones. And don't forget, Petri Hoskin will be in a little while to tell you what she's got lined up for your delectation from 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. So lots still to come. Stay tuned.
Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, Canada and the United States, that would really be something. All hell will break out in the Middle East, and it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks for your company tonight, and let's do it all again tomorrow. The Political Asylum tomorrow, 7 p.m. right here on Talk. I expect you to be there. Isabel Oakeshott will be joining me, among other brilliant guests. So lots to talk about. There always is. I've got a couple of great stories lined up for you. So tune in tomorrow, 7 p.m. The Political Asylum, hosted by me. Good to have you on board always. Here's a quick message I've had from Steve in Kimberley in Nottinghamshire. He says, great show, Kev. Thank you very much, Steve. The Home Office should attempt to deport this Gambian again. He won't qualify for legal aid this time. See how he feels about wasting his own cash. I like the tone of your message there, Steve, but I'll guarantee you a pound to a pinch of salt, he will qualify for legal aid. It'll cost us more money. And here's one from Tony. If I'm far right for having a different opinion to the government, are they extreme left? And do I need to worry about falling out of a sixth-floor window like Putin's opponents tend to do? That's Tony. No, Tony, no worries. If this government wants to knock you off, they'll screw it up and you'll live forever. Don't worry about it. This is from David in Chipping Camden. He says, I don't understand, Kev. I find it appalling that people can arrive illegally into the UK and then make spurious claims to receive free hotel accommodation and food. Then why does Starmer claim I am far right? Is not supporting illegal activity wrong in his view? Well, I think it probably is, Dave, yeah. I mean, they don't claim free hotel accommodation. We just give it to them. You know, we give them all this stuff. They arrive here, free pizzas, free hotel, free food for life, free lawyers, free doctors, free everything, free dentists, you name it. It's unbelievable what we offer them. They don't claim it, we just give it to them. And we wonder why they keep on coming. Of course they keep on coming. We don't have any deterrence in this country, you know, like the Rwandan scheme or anything like that Keir Starmer ripped up on day one, even though taxpayers had already spent £700 million on it. We don't have any deterrence anymore. We have enticements, encouragements. No wonder they're coming over at the rate of hundreds a week, thousands sometimes. It's unbelievable. Right, let's go back to the WhatsApp voice notes. First up, Chloe on two-tier policing. Take it away, Chloe.
About the two-tier policing, I think we only have to cast our minds back to the summer. We had the Hare Hills disturbances when the social workers were doing a safeguarding check on some children, and the police van turned up, and if you remember, it kind of did a three-point turn in the road and drove off, and the answer was they were going to leave them to it. A couple of weeks later, we have the Southport disturbances, which, albeit in some cases, were wrong, but you could see the difference in approach between the first lot of riots and the second lot.
Absolutely, Chloe, bang on, exactly right. The difference between Southport and Hare Hills in Leeds, Hare Hills, the police shipped out and said, get on with it. For 5 hours they left. People go, oh, the destruction was terrible. It might have been a little bit less, not as bad, if the police had actually stayed there. In Birmingham, they didn't turn up either because that was Muslims rioting. So they decided that in that circumstance, perhaps police presence wasn't needed. Southport, Rotherham, Rochdale, you know, all the other towns. Oh, it was, you know, the police were there like a ton of bricks all over the white working class riots. No doubt about it. Two-tier policing right there. You can see it with your very own eyes. The Prime Minister saying it's not an issue. How dare he? How stupid of him as well. How stupid. He needs to engage with the people about this because it's a thing. Lastly, here's Steve, another WhatsApp note on two-tier policing. Take it away, Steve.
And the real reason they want to get ban the term two-tier is because that snivelling weasel Starmer hates the nickname two-tier Keir, and now he's going to try and punish the bullies just like he punished the pensioners and the farmers. He's a spiteful, nasty little slime ball.
Yeah, two-tier Keir, three-gear Keir, never hear Keir. He must hate his name. It rhymes with too many things, doesn't it? But, yeah, I think that's one other reason he doesn't like two-tier policing, because it rhymes with Keir. Let's go back to the phones and talk to Paul, who's a new caller. Love new callers. He's in Stoke-on-Trent. Hello, Paul. What would you like to say?
Hi, Gavin. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
My wife and I were in London during between the two lockdowns. At the time, they had an amnesty for people to come and have COVID jabs. We were in Chinatown in London, and I was shocked. I used to work in that area. I was shocked that we couldn't get round Chinatown. There were thousands, 10,000, I would say, people in that area at that time who were under an amnesty.
Yeah.
I mean, what an opportunity to block at the end of the street off at both ends and send 10,000 of them home. I mean,
yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, what do you think? What do you make of what Donald Trump's up to? I mean, these long lines of migrants all chained up, being put onto aeroplanes and sent back to their home countries. Now, these are not like just people who broke into the country. These are rapists. These are killers, murderers, serious criminals, drug dealers, men of violence. Why can't we do that to our migrants, Paul?
Well, you've got to say that, Trump is a blunt instrument, and to say the least. But, you've got to agree with an awful lot of what he's doing. You've got to say to people, our government have forgotten what the word illegal means. These people are here illegally.
Yep.
That means they are not supposed to be here. Yeah. And the lefties all go, oh, no, we can't send them home. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, and they always say, Paul, I totally agree. They always say, Paul, immigrants are not criminals. Well, they are, actually. They arrived here illegally. They came here mostly without documents. They came on illegal boats, illegal vessels, and tried to break into our country. That makes them criminals. It's crap to say they're not. It just is ridiculous. But that is the mollycoddling approach that we have. Paul, I've got to move on because the show's nearly over. But thank you for calling, and don't make this your last call. Good to talk to you. Paul in Stoke-on-Trent, and one more new caller, James in Surrey. Hello, James.
Good evening, Kevin. Yes.
Two-tier policing. I mean, it is obvious, isn't it?
Clear as day.
I know.
A blind man in a welding mask would be able to see what's going on. It's frightening. It's frightening. I've got two children of school age, one of which is a young girl, and I don't understand why a certain demographic or a certain section of our society is being treated with kid gloves in the way that they are.
Well, I mean, they shouldn't be, but I do understand why. I do understand why.
I mean, there's something. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here in a tinfoil hat or anything.
Yeah.
But there's something more to this. There's got to be something more to this.
Well, there's two reasons, James. What one is, I mean, they're sort of North London, Islington liberals anyway, the small L, of course, socialists, who sort of believe that any kind of bad thoughts about ethnic communities, about members of the Muslim community, Islamic people, is somehow racist or Islamophobic. And the other is Labour Party need the numbers. They need the Muslim vote.
Well, obviously, we've got that.
They need that. There's 4 million votes in it for them, and they're going to need them at the next election.
I mean, is it the case? Is it or slightly the case that there's so many now that they're actually worried about upsetting the apple cart and everything?
Well, they're worried about upsetting the apple cart. They want to keep them happy. They want to keep them happy. It's as simple as that.
That's what I'm saying. Are we now in a position where if this crowd are upset, we cross the line too much?
Yeah, well, you know what we'll do. You know what they'll do. So you'll get some sort of Islamic terrorist who drops a bomb, who sets a bomb in a shopping mall, and Keir Starmer will turn around and say, "Yeah, that wasn't a terrorist." They've got their heads in the sand. They're like ostriches. They will not accept terrorism. Listen, James, good to talk to you, mate. And give me a call again. First-time caller, always good to have them. But I've got to move on now. James in Surrey, there. Petri Hoskin has been waiting patiently. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? What have you been eating?
Well, Jeremy Kyle left some cookies, as we say in America.
Kyle, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was only two.
Do you know what? When I come into the studio, there's been so many men in here. It's an absolute mess.
Oh yeah, that's a bit sexist.
It's true though. It isn't sexist if it's true. Right. What am I talking about? Why have we stopped having babies? Because we're looking at these net migration.
Men again, right?
Yeah. Net migration.